As animators, it's very important for us to always try to learn, improve, and develop our skills. We also need to remember that animation itself is an art form, and with any art form in the world, it requires practice to get good at. And that's exactly what I want to help you achieve in this masterclass. Is I'm going to take you through my assassin versus war fight scene animation, take you through it step by step of what I did to achieve the final result, and certain decisions I made within the animation. And hopefully, by seeing that, you can then take that information and impart it into your own workflow to improve as animators. But before we get too ahead of ourselves, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Rodgers-Blake, and I've been a professional animator for about 6 years now. I was born and raised in London, and I graduated from Teesside University back in 2016, where I studied computer games animation. From that point onwards, I worked on a number of projects ranging from small and large VR projects to cutscene animations with Screw Attack on their Death Battle series. I then went into mobile games where I worked on a number of titles, including some Marvel games and some Disney games. And then from that point onwards, I moved into AAA games where I worked with the likes of Creative Assembly on Total War Warhammer 2, Warhammer 3, and a small little bit of work on Total War 3 Kingdoms. From that point onwards, I moved on to Hexworks, a company that is responsible for the development of Lords of the Fallen 2, which, as most people know, is a Dark Souls based game. And I'm working on the boss team for that company at the moment. So, as you can see, I've gone through quite a lot in my short 6 year career, and I want to impart that knowledge that I have developed over my career so far onto you guys. And that's the purpose of me running the Advanced Animation Academy and this animation masterclass. So without further ado, let's get into the very first animation masterclass by the Advanced Animation Academy. Hello everybody and welcome to my animation masterclass. What I'm going to be teaching you today is how I made my assassin versus war fight scene animation. So without further ado, I'm going to get myself off the screen, show you what the final shot looks like, and then we can start breaking it down bit by bit. Let's let that play through one more time. So there's a lot going on in this fight scene. There's a lot of things to break down, a lot of things to digest, and I'm going to go through those with you one by one. But before I do so, I should give a bit of a backstory as to what inspired me to make this shot. One of the first things that inspired me to make this shot was the Overwatch 2 trailer. One of my favorite characters in that game is called Genji, and there was a shot where he ran into the scene. In fact, it's easier for me to show you rather than tell you. There's a shot that we have here where Genji ran into the scene to save everybody, and it was this. I really liked. I just really loved the animation in this shot, and it inspired me to make something similar but do it in my own unique way. So whereas in this scene you have Genji running towards the screen and then jumping into the scene to save everybody, I decided to do the something similar but then have it engage straight in a fight. So that was one of the places where I got inspiration for not only to create the shot itself, but then how I got my initial camera angle, which was my establishing shot. But you can see here, you've got the shot here where Genji's feet are only in frame, and then if you go to my one, you've got something similar where the assassin's feet are the thing that's in frame. So that was a direct reference to the Overwatch 2 trailer. There's something that inspired me to create that. But when it came to the actual creation of the animation itself, I took a different approach than what is usually taken in the industry. Typically within the industry, what happens is you create a storyboard, or a storyboard is created for you, and you would basically animate what's happening on those storyboards. Those storyboards first we put into an animatic, and for those of you who don't know what an animatic is, it's when those storyboards are taken and then edited to be timed like it would be in the final shot. So it kind of gives you a visual representation of what's actually going to be happening. Then the animator would then take that and then animate each scene respectively. So what I decided to do is, because I came up with this idea, or the inspiration for this idea, at about 3 in the morning, I wanted to get my ideas down in 3D as soon as possible, because otherwise I would procrastinate and it just ultimately wouldn't get done. So what I did was I went into Maya and I just created a quick block out of everything I had in my mind, using simple shapes. because it's very easy to animate simple shades and to iterate off of those, as opposed to manipulating a 3D rig, because it can be quite easy to fall into the habit of wanting to push the animation and get it to its final polish pass early. The purpose of this is simply to get your ideas down on paper, and you can then spend some time and iterate on top of that. So I'll show you what I had at this stage. If I just get myself off screen and press play. So you can see I got most of what I want happening down straight away just by using these shapes. And what is great about this method is that I'm able to mess with a lot of things. I'm able to get a sense of the weight of the characters, a sense of the timing of the shot, a sense of the kind of framing that I want, and I can tweak these things and I can take them to the stage that what you would get if you was to make an animatic, but I've skipped the process of having to draw things out on paper and then scan those in, bring those into a video editor. It just saved me a lot of time. I was able to get my ideas down very quickly. And what I like about this method is that if you showed this to another animator or even an animation supervisor, they would be able to see what you're going for right away. And they could even make suggestions on things you could do to improve the shot just by doing this. This here took me only a couple of hours to do, but you're well within your rights to spend even up to an entire day making sure that, you know, you've got this rough block out the way that you want it, because ultimately the better that you prepare for your animation, the better your animations are going to come out. So from here, from this point onwards, the thing that I had to do next was I had to start blocking out the animation. And the first things that you're going to notice is that when I use my reference for Overwatch 2, Genji, we don't know how far it is that he's traveling within 3D space when he's running. And conversely, if we look at my block out here, we don't know how far, in terms of actual stepping distances, character A is from character B. So how do you combat that? When you don't know the distance of something, you need a character to travel a certain amount. The best thing you can do is make a cycle. So that's what I did. So if I open up my Maya scene here, get this off the screen, bring this over here, you can see I've got my Assassin versus War animation loaded up. And what I'm going to do is hide the controllers and go into the perspective view. Where are you? So if you have a look here, you can see that I've got this character running quite far, but in the actual framing, if we go back to the main action camera, you can see he gets there very, very fast. And when you're animating a shot like this, it's okay for the steps not to completely match up. So long as in the camera, it looks like the feet are making contact with the ground properly, it's not a problem. Because if you go into the perspective view, there are many fundamental things that would not work in, let's say, game animation that is okay and acceptable here. So let's just zoom in and go from the side angle just for a moment. If we turn on the controls and frame through, you can see here we've got some foot sliding, and that is happening throughout the entire run. And you can see even here the distance that he covers in, let's just count it really quickly, 1, 2, in 2 point something seconds is ridiculous. This is easily over 30 meters long, so he'd well beat the 100-meter record. So anyways, the point being is that I made a cycle, and what I did was I took the center controller, so the center of mass, or the master controller, and I animated it going along the ground. So what that allows me to do is keep this character cycle, but then translate it through space. And because I've got an animated camera that's following him as well, it breaks that, you won't see any foot sliding. And because of that, it allows you to cheat. And it's perfectly fine to cheat with an animation, because what's important is the final result and what it looks like on the camera. That's what I did when I just did that initial establishing shot. Another thing you'll notice as well is that, well, one of the challenges I should say, was achieving the difference in weight between this guy and this guy. And one of the ways that I achieved that was actually, again, by cheating with the camera. Let me go back to the action camera. So one of the first things I did is, you're probably not going to be able to see it while I'm scrubbing through here. So I'm going to open up the graph editor and show you something. If I, actually, let me switch my views. There. So now we've got the graph editor down here, and we're going to select the camera, this one, and we're going to go to our rotate X, and then we're going to zoom in. What I want you to pay attention to, you see I've got these little dips here in the rotate X. What that's for is because I added a camera vibration or shake as soon as this big guy has hit his sword on the floor. I've also, if you've noticed as well, if I go into this camera view, I've purposely kept the camera very low throughout the entire shot, because what that does is, let me get this out of the way, because what that does is it exaggerates how big this guy is here. So when I create his lumbering movements, it feels natural. And it also sets a nice contrast for how this guy moves compared to how this guy moves. Because one of the things that you need to do when you're trying to achieve weight in big characters is you need to make their motions a lot more deliberate. What I mean by that is, for example, if the assassin was about to attack, he doesn't need as much build up and anticipation as this guy would to perform the same action. So for me to make this sword feel heavy, I've had to make him slam it on the ground. So this is his anticipation pose, and then drag it across the floor and then swing it forward. You even see here, if I go back into the perspective view, that him swinging this sword forward, the momentum has carried and forced him to take a step forward to catch himself. These are things that you need to consider when you're dealing with heavy characters versus light characters. A character that's much lighter, so if this assassin was to perform the same action, he wouldn't need to travel so far when swinging the sword. So it's those things that you need to bear in mind. It's just basic body mechanics, but that combined with some tricks for cinematography, keeping the camera low, adding some camera shake when there's large impacts on the ground, will really help sell the weight of your character, especially in contrast to this guy here. The movements, for one, should contrast the other. So if we go back to our action camera, sorry. As for the method of animation, how I actually animated these, I adopted the straight ahead and pose to pose in various different places. The way that I started it was, as I mentioned before with this guy here, I started the animation by creating a run cycle, which I created by pose to pose. And then even with this guy, his animations were mainly pose to pose. And when it came down to the polishing pass, that's when I did something that I can show you now actually. Where are you? It should be in here. Actually be easy if I show you on video. Bear with. So what you can see here is that when I actually blocked out the entire animation, I basically attached spheres to all the key points on the characters. So if you pay attention to just to war, I got it on the feet, the hands, the hips, the chest, and the head, and the tip of the sword as well. The reason I've done this is because when you're working on a character that has armor and other appendages like hair and stuff that would distract from the silhouette, it's very easy to get lost in that and to try and you'll miss things. And using this method, what it allows you to do is just focus strictly on what the body itself is doing and behaving. I'm going to give you an example of that, what I used with the assassin. So when I press play on the animation here, you'll notice when the character hits the ground here, he's got this nice bounce here on the hip slash chest, and he's got a nice follow through as well, because you see the head here. If I get my, let me get my pen, hold on. Let me get that up. There it is. So if we just get this epic pen tool here, and you just can actually just get a different color, so you can actually see it. So you can see here, from this point here, I've got this nice arc on curve on his back going here, and then as he hits the ground, you can see that I've reversed that curve. Let's get the pen again. And made it go this way. So what's happened is that the chest and the head has now followed through and overlapped with the hips. But at the same time, I've also, let me get another color. And let's scroll back. So at the same time, when the hips have hit the ground, you can see they bounce up slightly. So let me get the pen again. You can see that it's gone down, then up, and then down again, but not as far. What that is just settle. But if we go back into Maya and we look at this same, let me get this stuff off the screen actually. There we are. Hide the controls, and we get this same animation. What was distracting for me initially when I was trying to just add some detail to this animation is that I didn't have that bounce on the hips initially, because what was distracting me is that I had the sword that I had animated and bounced as well, and I had these controls here which I had animated as well, and I had that overlap with the body here, sorry, with the hips. And then what that did is it distracted me from what was actually happening with the main body. And it's very important that you nail what's happening with the body before you add any secondary action. So that's something that I learned as I was animating this shot. So that's what the sphere method allows me to focus on. It allows me to focus specifically on the body, and it allows me to hone down and just nail the body mechanics so that I can then have an easier polishing pass. Something that you see some animators do as well is that they'll hide parts of the mesh, and all it is, it's another method of achieving the same thing. So rather than me having to use an external tool, which allows me to hide parts of the mesh, which is, you can use this tool here, which if you select part of the geometry, I'm not going to use it now, but you can hide some of the mesh. But me using this method, I didn't have to have an external script and do that. I could just attach these spheres to key points of the body at the very beginning, and then parent constrain them to those points. And then what that allowed me to do was to, let me hide. I don't have a layer for the wall rig. Strange. But even so, it doesn't matter, because for the purpose of demonstration, you can see that doing so has allowed me to focus just on what the body itself is doing. Another thing you notice as well, what I've got here is, you can see that as I'm animating this shot, I'm always considering the way that the camera is framed in relation to both characters. And the reason that's important is because the way that you frame your shot ultimately dictates where you're going to direct the audience's eye. And I want the audience to pay attention to things that I think are very important. So what's important in this shot? For myself, what's important is to understand all of the action. This shot only comes across so well because it's very clear as to what's happening all the time. So for example, just from the very first establishing shot, which I used reference for, you can see that by only having his legs in frame, you're focused more so on where the character is going rather than what they are doing. Meaning, if you notice, now you're focusing on the assassin running towards War, and then you can see this nice slam on the ground here, which is anticipation for the oncoming swing. Then as the camera pans round his body, we reveal more of the assassin's body, because now I want you to pay attention to the fact that he's actually avoided the attack and not been chopped in half. One thing you'll notice as well is that I've gone for the like a handheld camera kind of effect, and the way that I've achieved that is I've actually added some random noise inside of the camera. So if I select the camera here, you can see I've got a whole bunch of keys here, which makes it look like it's baked, but it's actually not. Well, yeah, I did bake it later because I had to transfer the animation. But if we take a look at just the different rotations, you've got the rotation on the X, which is controlling all of the vibrations whenever there's a large impact. So you can see that that's happening right here, and you can see it happening over here as well. And then you've got rotation Y and you've got rotation Z, all doing different things. And the reason that they're all doing different things is because if they don't, what happens is you get a very static camera shot. So what you want to do is you want to add some randomness to those curves. So if I open that back up again, excuse me, the way that I achieved that was when I got the curves here, I quite simply selected a bunch of them and I dragged them over by different intervals. So I dragged them over by, let's say, 1 or 2 frames left and right. So I did that with the X and with the Y. And what that allows you to do is add some randomness to the way that the shot is. It doesn't allow the shot to stabilize properly, but you want to not go too crazy with it, because otherwise you can't focus on the action. So it's a balance and it's an art form. The way that you need to look at the camera is think of the camera as another character. In real life, when an action like this is happening, we're not able to anticipate what's happening next. Our eyes don't work like that. The action happens and we follow it. And the way that I've implemented that in this shot in particular is if you look when the assassin character lands here, what I've done here is I've pulled the camera backwards here to reveal the sword coming down. And if you notice, what's happening is as the assassin's head here has lifted up, let me load this on video actually because it'll be easier to show you. Let's load it on this animation here. So, as the assassin lifts his head upwards, you can see it's only after the fact where I've pulled the camera back to reveal the rest of the sword coming down on the character's head. And even here, the character is diving out of frame and then the camera catches up and follows him. It's just a way of simulating what would happen in real life because we're not able to anticipate the action that's going to happen next. So it's very important that you make the camera follow the action ever so slightly. And there's many ways that you can do that, but in my case, what I decided to do is I just animated the camera doing that by hand. But a trick that you could do is you could create a camera that has a lookout control and pin that to the character, and then you can bake that and then offset that by a couple of frames. And then what it will do is allow you to achieve the same result. I've got a camera dip here. Let me delete that. The next thing that I did to help with the framing of this shot as well is you can see that the action itself is quite tight. There's a lot going on. And if you can see over here where I've got the camera control selected, I've got the focal length here. Originally, my default focal length is at 35. But you can see that if I play that animation through, it's very tight to the action. A lot of the action is being chopped off. So what I want to do is I want to show most of this animation but without changing any of the positions of my camera because I've animated it to the camera, but I want to reveal a slightly more of the animation. You can do that by changing the focal length. So by changing the focal length to 24, you're able to reveal more of the animation. You can go even further with this and change it to something like 20 or even 15, which I wouldn't recommend for this particular shot, but you can adjust that as and when you need to reveal more and more and more of the shot. Let's just put that back to 24. One second. So, as for the structure of this shot itself, let me go into the perspective view to show you. As for the structure of this shot itself, it's actually a very simple animation. Animation-wise, this shot isn't very complicated. So the way it begins is I've started off by creating a run cycle, which I've already mentioned before, that I've translated by using the center controller here, or the master controller, translating that through space, allowing me to get that effect or feel that he's actually running through space correctly when he's not. As for the war character in this first scene here, I quite simply just animated this straight ahead. There was no need to go for to structure the animation the same way that I did for this, because what I did was I made this character here react to what this character is doing. So as you can see, it's a constant exchange, and when you're making a fight scene, the characters are interacting with each other. One character must always react to the other, and changing what character reacts to the other is what creates an interesting fight scene. So at first, this character is running towards this character. This character has reacted to what this character is doing, preparing to cut him down. Then at this point here, this character has noticed, he's engaged and is ready to cut him down and prepares to slide underneath him. As for the slide itself, I did use reference for this as well, and I think it's very important to always try to find reference when you're creating your animation. So if I load up this shot here, and this is from Overwatch 2, the fight scene between Hanzo and Genji. You can see here, what was good for reference in this scene is that the character is running and goes into a slide. Although it doesn't apply 100%, one for one with my needs, the general body mechanics are there. Another thing that I used as well, so if I get there, that pose, if you pay attention to this pose here, and then we go into my action camera, and we pay attention to this pose here, that pose, it's very similar. And the general mechanics of how the move works. So for example, having the arm out here, and then as he slides here, having the arm touch the ground, then come out here. delay with the rest of the body, is something that I got direct reference from for Overwatch 2. And I think it's very important that you use your reference to get the body mechanics down. And it's very important that you don't just copy a reference one for one, that you use your reference to extrapolate the information that you need to help you with the rest of the shot, because that's what it is, it's reference. You don't want to rotoscope what it is that you're looking at. So another thing that I looked at as well to help me with this animation is I looked at football slide tackles, because the concept of the move is the same. Suddenly lowering the body from a run, the hand is on the ground, planted on the ground, and although the end motion is different, you can see that here, you can see that the arm is dragging at a slower rate than what the hips are moving because of the friction on the ground. So that's something that I implemented here when I was doing the polish pass of this animation here. So as he places his hand on the ground, probably if I go to a different camera angle, you'll be able to see a bit better. So as he places his hand on the ground here, as we zoom in, you can see that I eventually have it stretched out here, so the hand is dragging at a slower rate than what the hips are moving forward. And it's just important to, when you're creating an animation, sure, it's fine to cheat where you can, but you also need to ground your animation in realism, otherwise you break your audience suspension of disbelief. As for the cinematic timing, because that's another thing that I get a lot of questions about in regards to this shot, I didn't have any reference for creating this slow motion effect, but there are many ways you can go about creating a slow motion effect. But the best method I can tell you to do is to bake the slow motion within the animation itself. Because if we go back to the initial block out, which I have here, you'll notice that there is no slow motion within the flip. It's just all timed at a very linear pace, and I purposely added the cinematic timing to break things up. But the way that I achieved that was I quite simply created a selection set for all of the controls on the rig, and by doing so I stretched out the controls for both characters and the camera as well. I stretched them, I quite simply got these and I stretched those out along the timeline. I'm not going to do that now because I already have that timing adjusted. But that's how I achieved that. And the reason I did that is because if you do this in post-processing, what ends up happening is I've animated this at 30 frames a second. If I then stretch those frames out for a certain duration beyond what they're originally rendered at, what happens is that you end up with a very choppy section that's not smooth, and there's nothing that you can do to fix that. So the best thing you can do is just give yourself the frames that you need to work. So I know that for this section, I'm gonna need to change the timing, change the cinematic timing. So I've just done that by stretching things out. So what happens is that when I render out the animation, it comes in with that timing already. One thing you should always do as well is that when you're playing with timing like that, you should play blast your animation. There are things you can do, such as going to Windows animation editors and time editor, and your time editors here, you can turn your animation into clips. I can show you that now actually. So if I was to just select the head, for example, and then create that, what happens, it turns the animation into clips, and you can cut, split, do what you want with that, pretty much like how you would in a video editor. And the only downside of doing that is that you bake all the animation down, and then it becomes quite difficult to then to clean up your animation when everything's all baked. So in this particular case, what I advise you to do is, if you want to create a slow motion effect, is put a key at, let's say, where did I start the slow motion? I started the slow motion here. Put a keyframe here, and then here I put another keyframe. And then what you want to do is move everything from this point onwards further up the timeline, and then stretch what's going on between here and here out to meet that. And then you want to play blast your animation, have a look at it, and adjust things accordingly. That way you can achieve nice cinematic timing without breaking all of your animation. You're going to have some issues basically with some of the interpolation in between frames. So what you want to do is, once you do that, you want to go into the graph editor. Let me actually select something, and then when your curves are all messed up, you want to select that section that you've got, and then you want to go to curves and then Euler filter. And what I'll do is I'll try to sort out all of the issues with the translation between frames. And then once that's done, you should have some nice smooth slow motion cinematic effects in your animation. Now, On the subject of polishing animations even more and adding weight, one of the things that, or one of the rules of thumb I should say, that you should bear in mind when you're creating a character that's big, large, lumbering, and heavy, is that when he creates an impact on the ground, the body will react more than it would if it was a smaller person. So, for example, you're not going to see a lot of up and down movement in the body, but what you will see is you will see a lot of secondary motion, such as jiggles in the armor, some movement on the sword, and it's going to create a shockwave that's going to resonate outwards. So that's why it's okay to have a camera shake here. One thing you will notice as well is that what I've done is, as he's hit the ground here, I've added the pose here of bringing his arm out, because when you swing a large sword down with one hand and you twist your body and you hit the ground with such momentum, you're twisting your body with such force that your arm is going to come out naturally to help you stabilize. And one thing you probably can't see it from this angle as well, let me change it to, as he comes down, you can see here that I've got that subtle bounce on the chest here as well. Usually what would happen as well, to exaggerate this, you could add a bit of bounce on the hips. Let me turn on this. To exaggerate this even more, I could have done something like this here, and then put a keyframe here, downwards. And then when he hits the ground, I could have added the made it upwards here, and done something like that. So although you've got some hyperextension on the legs, the reason I don't really mind, or I can ignore that, is because you're ultimately not going to see it in camera. If I was doing a games animation and I was looking at that, so then here, you don't really even notice it here. But those are things that you can do to help add more weight to your character. And you can see here that if you just pay attention to, let me turn off the assassin actually. And let's just pay attention to what War is doing. It'd probably be better if I go into a bit of perspective view for this. So let's just, you can see here that I've got a long anticipation, a long recovery or adequate recovery. Because what it allows me to do, it allows me to make the attacks themselves very snappy. That's just slow motion. And then here, even as he's picking the sword up from the slam, I've exaggerated the weight of the sword by making him lower, get that off screen, by making him lower his hips here. So you can see that animation is pretty jacked up, but you don't notice it on camera. So you can lower the hips here, then start to raise the hips as he brings his back upwards, because it makes the sword itself feel heavier, and it's just one of the things that you can do to achieve weight as well. Another thing that you should bear in mind is that you want to make the shot itself appealing, because I could have spent a lot of time focusing on all the 100% correct body mechanics for the shot, but then ultimately if it doesn't look appealing, what does it matter? So if I go back to the action camera, it's probably one of the last points I want to make for this particular class. Let me load the assassin rig up. If you notice what I've done here, I've broken the animation a little bit, doesn't matter. Anyways, if you notice what I've done here is I've got this character slashing across from, actually no, it'd be easier if I go from this camera and go to perspective. You can see I've got this character here slashing from left to right. Let me get this tool here. I've got the assassin going from this way, slashing across his body this way. So what should really happen is that as he's being cut down, he should probably be cut in half and his body collapses on itself, or if there's enough force, it should drag him this way and his body should collapse and end up over here. But for the sake of making the shot more appealing, I've ignored that, and what I've done is, as I've had the character pull across him, I've made him pull in with the sword slash coming this way. Let me get that out the screen and go back to this view. You can see what I've done is I've made the body be pulled in this direction. Let's just get this. You can see I've made the body be pulled in this direction. You can see that's exaggerated by the arc on his body here, where if you compare that to how it was originally here, where he's standing up on this frame here, you can see going from this, from basically something straight to something more arced like that. The drastic change in silhouette has just made it feel more appealing. Although in terms of body mechanics in real life, that's not something that would happen. In animation, it's okay to not only exaggerate what would happen in real life, but to sometimes push it to the point where something like that wouldn't happen if you're doing it for the sake of making the shot more appealing. Because there's enough in the shot that's grounded in reality for it to be believable, so that when it comes to this section here, you as the audience, you don't question it, because all of the other animation principles are present, or all of the other fundamentals in the shot are correct. So for example, when he hits the ground here, let's go for perspective again. Should really set a hotkey for this. So here, you can see the sword collapses on his shoulder here, and then he hits the ground here, and then eventually hits the ground. So long as the general body mechanics are correct, it's okay for you to exaggerate things and play with it, because ultimately, if you animate something exactly as it is in real life, you're not going to get a very appealing shot. So it's okay to break that a little bit within reason to achieve more appeal. Let me give you an easy example of this. So if we go back to our Overwatch 2 example, there's something I want you to pay attention to. If we scrub through the animation frame by frame, and then as Genji then springs into air, you notice we've got this frame here, which is basically a smear frame, where the character is stretched out beyond what his natural limit should be. And this is okay in animation. It's okay to do this over a small number of frames, because what it does, it makes the animation itself feel more alive. It makes it feel more expressive. So you can see here, if we just get the pen tool again, if you just look at the length of his leg here, and then compare that to the length of his leg here, you can see, let's get the pen, you can see that that's stretched out by quite a bit, and then the torso is stretched out even more. So just by examining that, and then what makes this really interesting is that you've got a nice shape change as well. So let me get those off screen. And what makes it really interesting is you've got a nice shape change as well. But back to my animation, because that's what I'm teaching you about. If we go to, where are you? It should be, there it is. So if we go to the final animation that I have, actually no, I'm gonna go to this one because the background stuff is distracting. Here, I've done the same thing here where I've actually stretched out the limb here so that it has more of an elastic feel as he comes off the ground. I've then done the same thing again as the character has gotten ready to hit the floor. So you can see here the leg is really stretched out, and by doing that over a couple of frames, you create a very nice, bouncy and expressive animation. So if you just play that through, it's something that you feel rather than see, and that's the purpose of it. And then I've done the same thing here as the character slashing through. Here you got motion blur, so it's hard to see. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump back into Maya and show you what that actually looks like on the frame. So here you go. You can see here that this character is stretched out to a ridiculous extent. This pose itself doesn't work within animation at all. But because I'm animating it for the camera, and I'm only doing it over one or two specific frames, in this case it's just 1, 2, 3 frames, and it's happening very quickly, I can get away with it, and it achieves a very elastic and snappy feeling, because the feeling I wanted to go for here was that he's slashing through the enemy very quickly, and how can I simulate that and make it feel believable, because you can't move that quickly in real life. But if you look at something like an elastic band, when you stretch it out and you let go of it, the way that it snaps back very quickly is something that we can relate to. So long as I don't push it too far, it's okay and acceptable within this animation. So when we go back to the action camera and we look at the result, happens so quickly that you don't notice it, but you feel it. And that's the point. So animation itself isn't just about making, you know, nice poses and just having things completely and perfectly structured. Yes, it's very important for you to structure your animation, which is what I did when I created the run cycle for this, when I blocked out some of the animation for this, and when I created my initial blocking animation. It's very important for you to block out your animations and be structured in that regard, but it's an art form. So you need to exaggerate things. You need to be show your personality as well within your animation. Show your own animation style. When you're looking at reference, use the reference to extrapolate information that you need to get the body mechanics down so that the animation itself seems and feels believable to the audience. When it comes to cinematography, you want to imitate what would happen in real life. Think about what kind of camera it is that you're using. Are you using a camera on a crane? Is your camera on a dolly? Is your camera tracking or panning? One thing you can do as an animator is look at movies and what they've done for cinematography, because they've mastered the art of showing something on screen and making the audience be able to believe it and follow the action. So you want to simulate that within your animations and use methods and just use the tools that you have at your disposal creatively to achieve that. As for technical things with this shot, one of the things that you'll notice is that I have this sword here. This sword actually wasn't originally part of this rig, and the sword that was part of this rig just came in one piece. This animation is really broken. I should really reload this scene, but yeah, I should probably reload the scene because it's really busted. There we go. Sorry, as I was saying, this sword actually wasn't part of the rig. So what I've had to do is I've gone to the rig's reference, hidden the original sword, and then I've basically rigged this sword to it. And obviously I've just done that just by skinning it to the correct joints. Well, actually no, in this case I just parented it to the controller here, which allows me to manipulate the sword here. But then what it also allows me to do as well is I have the freedom to select this end sword here and animate it separately as I see fit. As you can see here, I've actually got a part where the sword is being pulled out by the hand and then slashing from here to here. So how do I do that while this is still constrained to that? One of the things that you want to allow yourself in animation is to allow yourself to have flexibility. So what I did is I added a bunch of what is called fake constraints, and using Animbot here is something that you're able to do, because if there's a tool in Animbot called Xforms, and the way that it works is that if you select, I'm going to show you it really quickly. If you select the parent control, then the child, it could be anything. Then what you want to do is if you click on this button here, it will say Xforms copied. Hold on, let me get it. Should be copy Xform. Oh no, press the wrong button. So clicking this button here, usually what happens, you have something called Xform, it say Xforms copied. And what that does, it copies the relationship between, in terms of position and translation, translation and rotation between the parent object and the child object. And then what happens is you can bake that relationship over a certain number of frames. So by, let's say I had those selected, I pressed the Xforms button here, you can see that highlighted on the timeline. And then if I was to scrub through here and then click on this little arrow here and then click on paste Xforms and paste Xform relationship bake frames, it will bake the frames that I have highlighted, maintaining the relationship. So what it's doing is working as a fake constraint. But what's nice is that as it's baked the constraints, you can see here I have the keys here where it's all baked. I still have the flexibility of taking this control. Whoops. There we go. I still have the flexibility of taking this control here and animating it on top. Hold on. Oh, it's really bugging out. There we go. I still have the flexibility of animating the control on top. So it's a way of me constraining my animations to what I need them to be constrained to without breaking the animation I had prior to it. Because what would usually happen is that I would have to basically animate this being constrained to this, and then I would have to create a locator at the point where I grab the animation, make sure the pivot points and stuff are lined up, and then at that specific frame, copy those keys and then paste them onto this. That's a lot of work, and then what happens is that I'm unable to edit the animation easily. So I did the Xforms method because it allows me to bake the animation, get the constraint that I want, and also have the control it is that I needed to create a nice believable transition. So you can see when it comes to creating an animated fight scene or an animated scene in general, a lot of it is faked. You don't need to have, perfect body mechanics. Not everything needs to be perfect. If you've established your cameras the way that you want them to, and you can do that as early as in the blocking phase, of course there are going to be refinements and polishing as you go along, but you can find that you have areas to cheat. The best practice, I would say, is probably not to cheat in your animation, only because if you needed to change the camera for whatever reason, then your animation is essentially broken. You're gonna have to redo that section, which is fine, because in high-end VFX studios this happens a lot, because in a high-end VFX studio the camera is predetermined, so you don't have to worry as an animator about the camera itself changing. But if you're working on an animated movie like Arcane that was recently released, the director could decide to change the camera angle at any point. And if that happens, that's just part of the job. You're just gonna have to redo it and reanimate it. That's just part of the job. So to create your own animation that's like this, the first thing you want to do is, as I mentioned before, is you want to block out your animations. And you're gonna block out your animations by creating the rudimentary shapes. Because it allows you to get your framing, your timing, most of the shot you're able to get it down already, and then all you're doing at this point is you're filling in these blocks with the characters, and then you're going through your typical animation process of blocking, your key poses, in-betweening, splining, then polishing. And then when it comes to the polishing side of things, as I mentioned before, I would advise you to, once you've got your animation to the stage where you are somewhat happy with it, you, attach spheres to your character's main points of the body. Because what that then allows you to do is allows you to strip away all of the distracting mess that's on the character's model and focus specifically on the body mechanics itself within the shot. And it allows you to add some fine details. So one of the things you'll notice that I added here is, you can see here, if you just pay attention to this bottom foot here, I've got some foot sliding as he hits the ground and braces himself. That wasn't originally in my blocking and, in my initial splining pass. It's something I added afterwards. But having these spheres allows me to focus on just those specific parts of the body. And then when I can go into the animation now, and when I get there, I can add that. And then you can also add little things here like the foot roll here, so that you don't break the ankle. Ideally, I could even go a step further and add this a little earlier. So it's just these little things you can do, but by adding the spheres to those parts of the body, you stripped away all of the mess and you're able to focus specifically on that and achieve a very good animation. And the same thing applies when you've achieved good body mechanics. Once you've achieved good body mechanics, you can then focus on things such as the armor plates here or the sword here, and then add those in the little polish pass. You even notice here that you probably can't see it very well, but I've added some animation on the hood itself as well. All of these things are what you're going to be doing when you're polishing your animation. And animation itself is an iterative process. Creating a shot like this is an iterative process. You're not going to create the final result straight away. You're going to build it piece by piece. Like an artist, when they're creating a portrait of a person, they don't start off by drawing all the fine details right away. They draw the basic shape, such as the head, the block of the chest, neck, head, shoulders, all of the anatomy. And then they start slowly rounding things off, polishing things as they were, to achieve the final result. So that pretty much concludes everything that I have to teach for this animation masterclass. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope you've learned a lot in this short session. But before you go, there is something that I would like to make you aware of, an exclusive offer that you do not want to miss. As part of this masterclass, you have an exclusive discounts, to my animation online school, which is the Advanced Animation Academy. If you take a look here, the Advanced Animation Academy offers a lot of animation services, ranging from animation courses to animation consultations and to our Project AAA. I'm going to go through these with you very quickly. Our animation courses are available for animators of all skill levels. We have two types. We have our live learning and self-guided. Self-guided for those that want to learn at their own pace. This isn't currently available, but it will be coming soon. And our live learning courses, where the enrollment for these, the enrollment period for the current courses ends on the 10th of January 2022. So I advise you to take a look at that as soon as possible. Additionally, as for the courses, we cover the animation basics, body mechanics, creature animation, and motion capture. Motion capture is a course that will be coming later down the line. But if you take a look at just for our body mechanics, for example, you can see that the enrollment period starts from the 15th of November all the way until the 10th of January. So I advise you to take a look at that as soon as possible. You notice that the course fee is also priced at £750. That is actually a steal. When you compare that to all of the other animation online courses, you can see that it's priced well under them. And that's not an indication of quality. It's because I want to make animation accessible for everybody, and I don't believe that learning animation and improving your skills needs to cost you thousands upon thousands of pounds. So this can also be paid in 2 or 3 monthly installments. And as I mentioned before, as part of the masterclass or attendees of the masterclass, you have an exclusive discount of £250 by entering the code ANIMATE2021, all one word, all capitals. For those of you who want to know specifically what you're getting into with these courses, on all of the courses, the structure is there ready for you to have a look at, so you know exactly what you're getting into before you enroll. So it's about being fully transparent here. As for our other courses, so our Project AAA. Our Project AAA is something that is designed for those animators that want to wow the animation community, that want to really spice up their show reel and land a job in land their dream job. And you're going to do that by creating a shot over 12 weeks with us. So you're going to create a shot that is designed by you, for you, to help you achieve the results that you want. Your show reel ultimately is a vehicle that is going to drive you towards the job that you want, whether that's working at a company such as ILM, or whether that's working at a AAA games company like Creative Assembly. Being a part of this program, we can structure a shot that is going to help you achieve your desired outcomes. If you take a look at our program structure, we take you through the initial consultation, shot structure, and even gathering reference, all the way through to lighting, rendering, VFX, and composition. Those aren't something that you would be doing yourself, the lighting and rendering side of things. I'd pass your animation on once it's completed to our professional partners, the Planian Animation Studios, who have done work on my own animation shots. As you can see, that's happening on screen right now. The shot that I taught in this masterclass was actually rendered by them, and we have an exclusive partnership with them where you can get your shots rendered at a large discounted price. So what is that worth to you? Being able to have 12 weeks of one-on-one mentoring where you take all of my expertise and experience and pour that into your shot. That's not just animation, it's also my expertise in cinematography, my expertise in designing a shot, and we can bounce forward. It's not just me telling you what to do, it's a conversation. We're creating a shot that is uniquely yours and that is uniquely going to put your stamp on the animation community. What's that worth to you? For me, that's almost priceless. And if we take a look, as soon as the site loads, if we take a look, you're able to book your session whenever you want. So let's just say we was going to book this on Wednesday, and at 10 a.m. PM, sorry, you can see that we have a list of our prices here. Now this is priced at £2,400, and the reason for that is because you're getting quite a lot within this package. You're getting 12 weeks of one-on-one mentoring. You're getting access to our rig library, so you can take a look at the rigs from Kyle Figgins and Trurong, the CG artist. Any of their paid rigs, we're happy to purchase those for you on your behalf for you to use in your shot. You also have access to all of the scripts, tools that I use on a daily basis to help me animate. And you also get your shot professionally lit, rendered, and VFX applied. It's a steal. You also have the option of paying for these in monthly installments, as you can see here, 3 months or 2 months, or you can pay in full. You also receive an additional £250 off by using the code ANIMATE2021. It's a steal, and it's an opportunity that you don't want to miss. For those of you who just want to have a conversation about animation, if you need your show reel reviewed, if you have a project that you're currently working on and you would just like my input, we have a service available for you as well, and that is our animation consultation. It's a 1-hour session that is priced at £50, but as part of the animation masterclass, you have an exclusive discount of £25 off by entering the code HELPMEANIMATE, all one word. So book your consultation if that's something that you're interested in. And it's an opportunity that you don't want to miss. We have services here that are available for animators at any stage in your career, so I advise you take advantage of our exclusive deals while they last. Anyways, I've enjoyed teaching you in this masterclass. It's been a pleasure. thank you for your time, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one. And for those of you that take the opportunity and sign up to our animation courses and our animation programs and services in general, I look forward to seeing you there. So until then, take care.